What's up, guys? My name's Brandon, and welcome back to Apple Weekly. In this episode, we're going to be discussing even more new features and changes in iOS 18.4. We're going to talk about what's going on with the TikTok ban, Apple's new $5 billion lawsuits, why Apple products might start becoming a lot more expensive, and much more. And as always, if you want to stay updated with everything going on in the world of Apple, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below, and also check out the Apple Den Discord server. Okay, so this week was very interesting for many reasons. But let's start with Monday, because on Monday, we got the release of iOS 18.4, along with macOS Sequoia 15.4, and a lot of the other updates for all other platforms. So this was a big release. We did see quite a few new features and changes in iOS 18.4, as you saw from my video. However, there are some other things I want to mention in iOS 18.4. We'll talk about that in a moment, but later on in the week, we did see iOS 18.5 Beta 1 get released. So if you are on the beta program, we did get the release of 18.5 Beta 1. And that was kind of like an update where the rejects from 18.4, were put back on iOS 18.5. It's a very, very minor update, so I would recommend that most people just stay on 18.4 at this point. You're not really gaining much by going to 18.5 Beta 1, unless, of course, you are addicted to betas like I am, and I understand. And, of course, we will be seeing more features in iOS 18.5, but those will come in future betas. And, of course, we're not expecting the final release until next month. So, anyways, let's talk about iOS 18.4, because I think that's what the majority of people are still going to be on. And of course, that's where a lot of the big features and changes came from. Now, there are some additional changes that I somehow did not cover, and there's two of them that I did not cover. So if you go into the settings here, and we're going to go down to apps, and we're going to go into our mail. So if we go into mail right here, if we scroll down, you can see we have this new option for delete or move message action. So what this means is that when you're in an email and you delete it or you archive it, what happens next? So by default, and what it's always been for iOS, is it just views the next message. However, some people might not like that, which is why Apple added the option in here to not select a message. So when you delete it, nothing happens. It just shows a blank space. So let me show you how this works. So if we go into mail, so we'll just go into this email right here, and we're just going to hit the delete button. And then after that, you can see it just takes us back, it kicks us back to our inbox. Now, if I go and select view next message, and I do the same thing here for this morning brew, delete, you can see it takes me to the next message instead of kicking me back before. So now you have the option for what you want to do in the mail application, a nice solid addition that was added here in 18.4. And the other thing that I missed is a very minor one, but I still wanted to cover it because you guys know that's how I do things here on the channel. So if you go into your settings and go into the voice memo settings, we have a new reset identifier toggle down here at the bottom under privacy. So if you want to reset the identifier used to report aggregate app usage statistics, you can go ahead and turn that on if you would like to. Now, there's also something else I wanted to mention in iOS 18.4 because I've not really seen many people talk about this, and I didn't actually cover this a lot in my videos either. I think I may have mentioned it one time in a video, if that, but it's something to do with the ambient sounds. So if you go to ambient sounds, you can see that we have these right here. Now, once you already have an ambient sound added to your control center, which of course, if you've not seen that, all you have to do is go down here and you can see we have our 4 ambient music controls, which, by the way, just side note, I'm really confused as to why Apple didn't just make this, at least give us the option for one platter full of all 4 ambient music toggles instead of having to add each one individually. Anyways, regardless, so if we go back out of here, so if you go ahead and tap on one of these ambient sounds, take a look at what happens. It opens up this menu right here where you can choose the playlist. So if you don't like the default music that's playing from this toggle, you can change that. So different types of, sleep sounds, piano sleep, sound bath, bedtime beats, or you could select a custom playlist from your library. So this is really cool, and you can see what it's like here for chill. So you have ambient chill, you have lo-fi jazz, pure chill, and of course piano chill is the default. And for productivity, you have beat instrumentals as the default, and then you have these other ones there as well. So I just thought that was pretty cool, and you don't really see many people talking about that feature here in 18.4, at least the ability to change the playlist. Like the feature, of course, is very well known. People know that, but to be able to change the playlist is pretty cool. Now, also, when I shot my iOS 18.4 video, we did not know what security patches would be included with iOS 18.4. Those always get published after the software gets released, usually like an hour or a lot longer than an hour after the software releases. And we take a look at the security notes here for iOS and iPadOS 18.4. They are extensive. There are quite a few. There are dozens. I think it's, maybe 60 different changes here, or patches here for security vulnerabilities. So if you were on the fence about updating to 18.4, security patches, especially with this number of security patches, is always going to be a good reason to go ahead and update to keep your device as secure as possible. It's most likely nothing, is going to ever happen to you in regards to these, but you really don't want to take the chance. So it's always a good idea to go ahead and update for those security patches. And you can see them right here for macOS Sequoia 15.4 as well. There's even more than what you see on iOS. So for macOS, I would definitely recommend going ahead and updating. There's a lot here. Now, also like we discussed last week and also in my 18.4 video, if you have the AirPods Max, you got a firmware update that would add the new features of lossless and low latency audio. So those are now supported with the AirPods Max. It's something long overdue. That is just for the USB-C version, by the way, of the AirPods Max. However, when iOS 18.4 came out, it actually prevented that firmware update from hitting the AirPods Max. So the AirPods Max couldn't even update to take advantage of the only new feature that it got. Now, thankfully, Apple did fix the issue and it was re-released the next day. And we do see that that build number here, that firmware version is 7E101. And that is the update that includes those new features for the AirPods Max. But not everything is going great with iOS 18.4, because if we take a look over on the CarPlay subreddit, there are a few people reporting issues with connectivity on iOS 18.4. So this user right here posted a thread about his 2025 Honda Civic Hybrid, and he said that before, music, the now playing music would show on the CarPlay extended screen over here on his dash, but ever since updating to 18.4, it no longer appears on the dash, it's just blank. And if you look down in the comments below, there are other people having this issue as well, and it's apparently been confirmed as a bug. So apparently this person says that Volkswagen informed customers about that issue and that Apple has to fix it. So that's interesting. If you do have CarPlay, let me know if you're having any issues here on 18.4 or not. So for some reason, a lot of people were not aware that TikTok was supposed to be banned in the US this week. So a lot of users forgot that there was another ban upcoming for TikTok. However, it looks like President Trump has said that he's going to delay this ban by another 75 days. Now, TikTok, obviously there is a lot of chatter about somebody buying TikTok, at least the US entity, and we have seen multiple companies make bids to purchase TikTok to prevent this ban from happening. So it looks like that's what Trump is kind of doing. He's giving them, more time to eventually lead to a sale. We actually saw Amazon put in a bid to purchase TikTok, which in my opinion, I think that would be a fantastic purchased by Amazon, because in my opinion, I think TikTok is the biggest competitor to Amazon. With TikTok Shop is much larger than people think, and I think that's really one of the biggest competitors to Amazon right now. So it'd be a great idea and a great acquisition for them if they purchase one of their biggest competitors. So they made a bid for it. AppLovin made a bid for it. There are other companies out there making bids for TikTok as well. I'm not so sure it's even going to sell, period, but at least we still have some time on TikTok. I know a lot of people don't like TikTok, but hey, if you are on TikTok, go ahead and follow me over there. I'm just at brandon.butch. I do post a lot of my short form videos like you see here on the channel, as well as YouTube shorts. Also this week, we saw some new games come to Apple Arcade, including one of my all-time favorite games, Rollercoaster Tycoon. So this is Rollercoaster Tycoon Classic Plus, and you can see we have this really nice landing page here, and it shows you about the game. This is one of my favorite games that I played as a kid. It is a core memory of mine as a kid on my big computer. So if you want to relive that memory, if you're in the same boat as me, you can now download Apple Arcade, or if you're an Apple Arcade subscriber, you will be able to download Rollercoaster Tycoon along with some other games as well. We also saw an update to the iWork applications. So Numbers, Keynote, and Pages all received updates this week, and you can see the changes there for Numbers. We also have these changes right here for Keynote, and you can see these are also related to iOS 18.4. They require iOS 18.4 to work. And then here's what we have for Pages. So all of these updates were pushed out, kind of in correspondence to iOS 18.4, since these updates do require that software version for these features to work. And speaking of applications, we saw Apple get sued this week for $5 billion over the Apple Books application. So this is a $5 billion class action lawsuit, and it was filed by somebody out in California this week, and it accuses Apple of violating the state's false advertising law and other consumer laws because Apple apparently intentionally misled customers into thinking that they were purchasing digital ebooks from the Apple Books application in perpetuity, when instead they are only purchasing revocable licenses to the books. Because they're saying that the purchase screen in the Books application doesn't include a link to any terms of service or licensing information. So the plaintiffs are seeking up to $5 billion in damages, with the proposed class being all individuals who purchased a digital book or audiobook from the Books application or the bookstore within the to be determined class period. So they haven't determined the amount of time that this has been going on for, but apparently it could be up to $5 billion. So that's interesting. Not too sure that's actually going to go through, but that was proposed this week. I also kind of found it funny that the law firm that is making this lawsuit is named Siri and Glimstad LLP. So literally Siri in their name. Not sure if that's intentional or just a complete coincidence, but I found that to be funny. Anyways, going back to iOS 18.4, we're going to talk about 18.5 as well. We may as well. The performance on both has pretty much been the exact same. So I was worried about iOS 18.5 having the boot loop issues like I had on iOS 18.4. However, I've not been having those. So that is a great sign. I was very worried about that, honestly. So I've not been having those issues with 18.5 beta 1. But like I said, unless you have a secondary device, I still would not recommend installing it on your daily. It's just really not worth it because there's really no new features in it, no notable features in it. So I would kind of just hold off on that. But performance on 18.4 has been great. I've really had no complaints with 18.4, the final release. I'm just glad to see that after the big issues that I had with the first RC. Now, as far as battery life goes, battery life has also been tremendous on iOS 18.4 and also surprisingly on iOS 18.5 beta 1. I'm very surprised by the battery life in beta 1 of 18.5. It's pretty much the same as 18.4. Like I've not been able to tell really any difference when I switch from 18.4 to 18.5 beta 1 on my main device over here. So that's impressive. You guys let me know in a comment down below though if you've had a different experience with either performance or battery life. This is a crowdsourcing thing. I need you guys to let me know your experience as well. Now, as far as what to expect next from Apple, this week was jam-packed with software releases. There's been a lot of stuff just going on in the world related to Apple, the stock price tanking, but next week I think it's going to be a lot more chill because not only are we not going to see any new software updates, but there's really nothing else going on because we're kind of in this lull period until WWDC at this point. So not expecting any new software next week. It is possible, of course, but we're probably not going to see the second beta of iOS 18.5 until the week of April 14th. And then after that, we should see the final release of iOS 18.5 at some point in May. And then, of course, we will have iOS 19 beta 1 on Monday, June 9th, after the first day of WWDC 2025. Oh, and also, I do want to mention that we are most likely going to see an iOS 18.4.1, a double point update, a bug fix update at some point in April or maybe even early May. It's most likely going to be in April, but we'll have to wait and see. It depends on what Apple decides that they need to fix in terms of bug fixes or security patches. So we'll see. We should be seeing that though. That will most likely be the next public release before iOS 18.5 in May. All right, so now let's move on to the latest Apple news. And let's start with tariffs and the iPhone price potentially being a lot more in the coming years. Because this week we did see President Donald Trump announce the tariffs, the sweeping tariffs of several countries, and this could drastically increase the price of consumer goods. Of course, one of those consumer goods that's most likely going to be affected are iPhones. Now, they could be some of the hardest hit, according to analysts at an equity research firm. They're saying that iPhones could cost up to $2,300 in the US due to tariffs. That's a 43% increase. So they're saying that the cheapest iPhone 16 is currently $799, but after tariffs, that cheapest iPhone 16 is going to be $1,142, according to the firm's predictions. And the iPhone 16 Pro Max 1 terabyte is currently $1,599, but after those tariffs, it's going to be nearly $2,300. And here's a mini chart showing the percentage increase to cover for tariff costs. You can kind of see the percentages there, pretty wild. So obviously with this, there's been a lot of panic and a lot of people saying, what is going on? Are we really going to have to pay $3,000 for our iPhones over the next couple of years? And the answer, in my opinion, is no. I don't think these tariffs, especially, what's being, sent to us, like the prices that we're actually going to see, I don't think it's going to be nearly as drastic as these predictions claim. Now, I could be wrong. They know a lot more than I am. They're a lot smarter than I am. But just using psychology, I just don't think that we are going to see that big of an increase. Like, everybody's panicking. Everybody's saying it's going to happen. So it's probably not going to happen. So we'll have to wait and see. I'm not on either side of this. Like, I have no, anything in this. I don't have anything in this war. I'm very, in the middle on this, but it is pretty interesting, and it is potentially going to be, something that could have a big increase in prices of iPhones and just consumer goods as a whole moving forward. But I just don't want you guys to panic. I don't think it's, time yet. I think it's way too early to panic about everything just completely going up by double, over the next couple of years. Like, yes, we could see a small increase in price. I just don't think it's going to be like a drastic increase like a lot of these people are predicting. So do you guys remember the Apple Card and how Apple is losing so much money and Goldman Sachs are losing so much money on this Apple Card? Well, apparently we have a fight going on to secure a deal with Apple for the Apple Card. So it looks like Visa and Amex are trying to win the bid for the Apple Card, and they're still fighting against MasterCard, who is, quote, fiercely trying to retain its role as, the Apple Card issuer there. So just this week, we did hear that Visa is now offering Apple $100 million up front to be their partner for the Apple Card. So really at this point, we don't know what's going to happen. Of course, we do know that Goldman Sachs is exiting this deal. They said so themselves. We saw multiple reports of this early on. So they're no longer going to be the one. So we could see it go to, obviously Visa or American Express, or it could just stay with MasterCard. So we'll have to keep an eye on this, but I found it interesting that Visa is making a statement now and really trying to, secure this deal with Apple. Now, if you're a fan of the iPad mini, raise your hand. I am a big fan of the iPad mini, and one of the things I've been wanting on the iPad mini for so long is an OLED display, and it looks like that might actually be happening soon. So according to Digital Chat Station on Weibo, he said this year mainstream brands have 3 8.8-inch flat panels, 2 LCD, 1 OLED, and 3 flagship chips on different platforms. In addition, the iPad is also evaluating a small OLED. So small OLED means, of course, iPad mini. So we could potentially be seeing an OLED iPad mini in the near future. Now, do not expect like an iPad mini Pro, 120 hertz, like crazy specs, anything like that. I don't think we're going to see that. But even just slapping an OLED on there, even if it's not a ProMotion display, I think it's going to be a big win for the iPad mini. That's something I've wanted for a long time to pretty much perfect my experience on the iPad mini. I do think 120 hertz would actually be perfect for it. I just don't see Apple doing that. But again, even an OLED will be an upgrade. So if you're a fan of the iPad mini, let me know your thoughts on it potentially getting in the next, couple of years, getting an OLED screen. Anyways, guys, that's it for this week. No crazy AirTag story. I couldn't find any really crazy, compelling ones that I did not already cover. So we'll try to be back next week with another crazy AirTag story. I know you guys love those, so I'll be on the lookout real heavy this week, looking for one to cover in next week's episode. So if you don't want to miss that, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below. Of course, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Let me know all your thoughts down there in the comments below, and I'll see you guys soon.